Good afternoon and welcome to your lecture on Rembrandt. Rembrandt is closely related to Frans Hals, but he is miles deeper and far more daring. I think you'll enjoy looking at his work, and I hope you get to hear a little bit of the jazz band in the background that's playing downstairs this afternoon. The first painting that we have to look at is the anatomy lesson of Dr. Nicholas Tulp from 1632. It's an oil painting that's over 7 feet wide, and so this you can kind of relate to the group portrait that we looked at by Frans Hals, as we can do with the next painting as well. I think you see what I mean by the fact that Rembrandt's deeper and more daring with what he does in this particular group portrait. It's so much more dramatic. The expressions on everyone's faces are really attuned to the way the doctor is lecturing here, and it's a pretty exciting and dynamic painting. What with that intense black that Rembrandt uses in the background. He is an absolute master of using black. Maybe Rembrandt's most famous painting is The Night Watch from 1642, a painting that's over 11.5 by 14.5 feet. Quite a large-scale group portrait again. Now, this is a situation where Rembrandt was extremely popular. Initially as a portrait painter, he was very, very well known and very successful. In this painting, you see a great dynamic group portrait, but you also see a painting that most likely did not please everyone that was in it. Some of the people are obscured or hidden a little bit, and you can't imagine that they're terribly excited about playing a fringe role in this dynamic composition. This painting was attacked several years ago by a frustrated artist, I hesitate to even call him that, who went in and slashed the painting vertically many times with a knife, and they've done a tremendous job restoring it. And here you see a great detail of the captain of this company in this painting, nicknamed The Night Watch. It was not titled that in Rembrandt's time, but has since come to be known by that very title. When we look at Vermeer's work, I'm going to suggest that he's maybe the greatest realist of all time. With Rembrandt, I think we're looking at maybe the greatest painter of all time, certainly the greatest chronicler of man, of the Bible. And one of the great series that Rembrandt works with over the course of his career is the self-portrait. And this is a painting called The Artist in His Studio, a very small painting, 10 by 12 inches, so it's not much larger than what you're looking at on the screen right now. Pretty dynamic to see the easel in shadow, taking up so much of the painting, and in the foreground, such as it is, and then the artist in the background, sort of surveying his work, trying to decide what step he needs to take next. I love the way the palette hangs on the wall in the background as well. This is Rembrandt's self-portrait as a young man. Color's a little neutralized here in the slide compared to the way it actually looks, but Rembrandt is known for using these sort of rich golden earth tones throughout his paintings. As we go through several self-portraits here, running across a span of nearly 40 years, I want you to just look at and observe how his style evolves. In this particular self-portrait, you get a sense as to why he was such a popular portrait artist in his day. His technique is astounding. No detail is left unexplored, and he could just virtually do anything he wanted to with paint. Tremendous, tremendous talent in terms of technique. And at the same time, Rembrandt's so much more than technique, in that you look at this painting done fairly early in his career and get a sense of what he was like as an individual. Powerful gaze that locks onto you as the viewer. In addition to doing many great paintings in self-portraits, he also did this piece as an etching from around 1630. And gives you a sense that maybe Rembrandt had a little bit of a wild side to him as well. This looks somewhat like my teenage son, at least so far as the hairdo is concerned right now. This is called Self-Portrait in an Oriental Costume, and Rembrandt loved collecting these costumes and had a studio that probably had a tremendous warehouse of still life objects and costumes and effects, so that he could get any sort of thing to depict in a painting just right there at his disposal. Early on, when Rembrandt was such a successful portraitist, he commanded vast sums of money for his paintings, and he lived really well. But he still managed to spend more than he was taking in, and so when his fortune started to slip a little bit, it wasn't long before Rembrandt was pretty much destitute. This is a self-portrait with his wife Saskia, and we commented on how Frans Hals was filled to the gills every evening. It looks like Rembrandt is filling his gills pretty well here. Kind of exciting painting, fun with the gestures. You look at her almost disapproving look, and he is just having a great time. Fairly dynamic composition, maybe not quite as wild as some of the Rubens pieces that we looked at in Flanders, but nevertheless far from being static. A rather odd self-portrait here, a self-portrait with dead Bittern from 1639, a painting that stands about 4 feet tall. Some pretty good scale on these things. We've got two more self-portraits to look at, and this is one of my all-time favorites right here. This is from 1660. You know, you see the older Rembrandt. You see the, if you want to call him that, fallen Rembrandt, in that he has fallen on hard times by the point that he's done this picture. At this point in Rembrandt's career, he is painting for himself. He's not painting for the patronage. He's not painting for the critics. He's painting for himself, and he's depicting what he looks like and what his life has done to him and how he has ended up at this point. And I think it's just a fantastic painting. If you get a chance, look at some details of this painting, and you'll see the way his cap is handled with just dramatic, vibrant, vigorous brushstrokes. It's almost like this is an immediate precursor to Van Gogh. And here's a very late self-portrait from 1669 that I think shows you that Rembrandt has sort of come to grips with how things ended up for him. You know, he's happy that he's come around to painting for himself as opposed to patrons. Here it is. Here's what I look like. I may not have the wealth that I once had, but I have created a tremendous wealth of paintings. One other thing that's interesting to note about Rembrandt is that he was maybe the greatest teacher in all of art history, because he was able to teach his students so well that many of the greatest paintings from this era, we're not sure whether Rembrandt did them or whether his students did them. In fact, the Rembrandt panel that's gone around the world studying all of his works, trying to decide just exactly what he painted and what he didn't, has determined that many of the greatest paintings were done by his students. So a great, great teacher indeed. It sort of recalls Leonardo's statement that it's a poor teacher whose students do not eclipse him. This is a hideously colored slide. It's his wife Saskia as Flora. Saskia was his beloved wife who died very early on, and this happening just really crushed Rembrandt's spirit for a good little period of time. This slide also has faded greatly over time, and it's a woman bathing in a stream. And it is, I think, one of the most beautiful paintings that Rembrandt ever made. It seems very, I don't know how to describe it. It's an intimate picture. Another piece with horrible color, but a great, great image, is called Titus at his desk. This is a painting of his son. You can see him maybe overwhelmed by homework, or challenged by homework, or just, if it could even be so, enjoying his homework, enjoying the problem that's been posed. appears to be a rather quick-witted child. Rembrandt left behind many great drawings. This is Faust in his study, watching a magic disc from 1652 to 53, a pen and ink drawing that's only measuring about 8 by 6 inches. And Rembrandt did beautiful drawings like this that are very detailed, and then he also did many like the next one that are done in a very different style. This is an etching called the Sixth Bridge, and you see how much looser this is. Many of Rembrandt's beautiful drawings are done in a style very much like this. In addition to being such a great painter, he was maybe the greatest printmaker of all time, an honor that he might share with Albrecht Dürer. And you see this beautiful, lively, quick line that moves across the entire sheet of paper. In Rembrandt's etchings, he would often work them, print them, rework them, continue to rework them, and they exist in several different states. This is another etching by Rembrandt entitled Seated Nude from 1658, and you can see how he really goes in and does a lot of cross-hatching to get these extreme darks throughout the image area. What Rembrandt often would do is he would start the image and maybe just have the figure, and then go in and print it and do an edition of it, and then come back to that same plate and rework it, and then print it again. The amazing thing about many of Rembrandt's etchings is their size. Some of them are only 2 or 3 inches tall. They're amazing things to study, and a number of the plates actually exist to this day. Now, the last great theme for Rembrandt was the Bible, and he's maybe the major interpreter of the Bible in all of art history. This is Christ raising Jairus' daughter, and it's one of his quick ink drawings, and it's where he's just trying to get the idea down, understand the composition, and then be able to use this in an oil painting later on. Here is one of Rembrandt's great oil paintings from the Bible. This is Supper at Emmaus from 1648. It's a relatively small painting, just a little over 2 feet square for Rembrandt. And he would go out and find maybe young rabbinical students or someone like that to pose as Christ in his paintings. And he's very much tied to nature in doing these works. It's not strictly from imagination. This painting, Simeon's Song of Praise, gives you an idea as to just the beautiful color range that could exist in a Rembrandt. While he didn't use a lot of different colors, he was able to fully exploit the strengths of each color in these paintings. They're tremendous in their value range, but they're also tremendous in terms of how color is used and how texture is used. Those beautiful blues against the yellows, and then with the overall red tonality of the painting, makes for a very exciting image. And our last Rembrandt to look at today is The Return of the Prodigal Son, one of his most famous images, a painting that countless words have been written about. In fact, books have been written about this single image. And it really says it all. You see the prodigal son returning there with, one shoe and one bare foot. And then you see the son that was always by his father's side off to the right, kind of looking on in a condemning fashion. I've always been here with you. Why are you celebrating the return of this one? Now, when you look at Rembrandt's work in his career, think about his styles and how they changed. The early styles generally characterized as lasting from around 1622 to 42, and the late style goes from around 1643 to 1669. In the early style, you saw dramatic light and dark contrasts. In the later style, there's golden brown tones and subtle shading. In the early style, the design seemed to burst the frame. And in the later style, there's sort of a static, brooding atmosphere. The early style, there's often scenes with groups of figures, while later on he often turned to a simple scene with just a single subject. Early on, like much of the Baroque, it's based on physical action, while later it's about an implied psychological reaction, such as is the case with this painting. Early on, vigorous melodramatic tone, highly finished, detailed techniques, and in the late style, there's a quiet, solemn mood, and they're painted with broad, thick brushstrokes, and Rembrandt is a painter's painter.